So, as you can see here, I've got the 5mm Allen key that needs to remove these two socket screws. I'll pull those off and cut to the next scene. You got to be careful. It looks like the positive and negative cables are attached to this screw, so you don't want to pinch those cables if you don't have to. There's one. There's two. Now I'll pop this off. So now with that bracket removed, you can see where the holes were, where I had screwed it. And you can see the cable brackets that basically mount right underneath the screws when you put them back in. So now we're going to take the same 5mm Allen key and remove the tank bolts. So one thing I'm going to check for on these bolts, if there's any Loctite on the threads. If so, I will be putting Loctite on these threads before I reinstall it. It looks like there's a bit of a spacer here, so I'll be careful not to lose any of the components. So there it is. It looks like there's a collar spacer as well as a rubber grommet in the tank. And the next one, I did not see any Loctite, blue, red, or otherwise on the threads. But I will check the torque ratings on this before I reassemble. So there it is. There's the bolt and there's the metal collar that comes with it. All right, so for the next phase, I'm going to attempt to remove this ignition key cover. From what I can tell, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that need to come out. All right, I've already removed these first 2 screws from the top. I did remove the ones from the front here. These ones are different. It's still a 5/32, but these have got a collar on them. One thing I did know, you can see that this is actually cracked, so I'm not sure what happened here. At some point, something was dropped on this. I might have to look at replacing this later. Here's the last one to come out. Again, it's a 5/32 Allen head. You can see what that looks like. There's the collar, as well as the screw that holds it in place. So I'm hoping with some finagling, that cover will come off without breaking. All right, that cover came off pretty easily once those 4 bolts were removed. It's just a matter of kind of sliding it up and sliding it back. You see here, there's just some slots where they go in at first and then you pull it backwards and it locks into place. I just took a closer look at this cover plate, and it looks like there most certainly is a crack. Mind you, it's hard to see, so I'm going to try to maybe JB weld that or something like that, or potentially get it replaced. But that'll have to be done later, as we're just trying to get to the air filter at this point. All right, before I proceed, I've got a close-up of these threads here. It looks like there is some sort of a thread lock on there. So I likely am going to use some likely blue Loctite on that ignition tank cover when I reinstall these. All right, so for this next piece, I'm going to take some of this plastic fairing off. It looks like I've got a screw here, likely some sort of a pop mechanism in here. I'm not sure about this. I'm likely going to pull that screw out as well, just to be sure. And this whole piece should slide out. So I'll give that a shot. Hopefully I don't break anything. All right, so again, I'm using my 5/32 T-handle. Take a look at that. There's definitely some thread lock on here. All right, here's my next one. Same size, 5/32, Allen. All right, we're gonna come back to that fairing. I'm struggling with that side piece, so I'm gonna come back here and focus on these two tank bolts. Again, 5mm Allen. I already cracked these, so they're already a bit loose. Again, so it's just a washer and a thread. It looks like there's rubber grommet inside there as well. Next one. Same thing. I don't see any thread lock on here, but these are definitely torqued. All right, let's see what's left. All right, so here's a little trick I learned the hard way. There's a little slat there where you can stick a flathead screwdriver. That will allow you to hold the back of that metal bracket that is holding in, or that is threaded into this bolt. I need two hands for this, so I can't really show you at the moment. All right, well, these screws on the fairings were very interesting. You can see I finally got this one out, as well as the top one out. And what these are screwing into, I'm not sure if you can see in there, but there's a plastic washer that these things thread into to keep the vibration down. What was happening is, as I was unscrewing it, the rubber washer kept spinning with the screw, so I used these tire inserter tools just for some leverage. Now, these are plastic. I didn't scratch the tank at all, but I essentially had to put pressure on the fairing as I unscrewed it, and essentially that allowed for the thread to catch in that rubber seat to allow me to remove this screw. So far that was the most unpleasant part. Hopefully that's it. But let's see what we can do next. All right, so this plastic fairing piece here ties into the tank with these grommets. So there's a couple here on this side. And here's another two on this side. You can see where they pop into, and you can see the nipple that pops into it. Now I think this should allow me to remove the tank. Now to get the tank off, I've got to isolate this hose here. So that's my next adventure. I'm going to just try and do this with my fingers here. You can feel that there's a nipple in there. I want to reuse this hose clamp if I can. Okay. So off that comes. There's the clamp. There it is, just like that. Relatively easy. Okay, so with those off, I think that fuel tank will come off. All right, so here's a piece that wouldn't allow the tank fairing to come off, but essentially there was a screw here holding this little bit in, and now this whole piece is loose. And I should be able to pull this whole thing out once I get the other side. All right, you can see on the right side there's another screw here where my finger is. I'm going to pull that out, and that should allow the fairing to separate, hopefully. And let's not forget about one more screw here holding that fairing in. That should let me pop everything off right now. And again, a couple screws on that fairing going into the tank. We're going to pop those off. All right, you can see here I've got the tank fairings off. Incredibly unpleasant. There are a lot of hidden screws to this. Having said that, I've got the tank off. Just curious how well it's going to reinstall later. Hopefully no issues, but we'll see. All right, so for this next piece, it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Phillips screwdrivers to take this cover off. All right, I'm starting to regret this project. There it is in all of its glory, the air filter. I don't know, it's probably been an hour and a half for me to go through all these plastic fairings and everything figured out. Everything looks fairly decent. There's a bit of dust in there. I might vacuum that out later. It looks like there's a Phillips screw right there that I've got to undo to get that air filter out. So let's give it a look. Okay, and there it is with the air filter out. Doesn't look that bad inside. I'm going to give it a wipe out, possibly a vacuum. And then here's the filter. Probably a good time to change. I'm at about 17,500 kilometers on this bike. So I think it's a good idea to change this. Okay, YouTube, I have a bonus feature here for you. As I was removing this plastic top tank cowling, I noticed that this thing has got a fracture right here. Now, this didn't happen when I was pulling it off. I think I set my helmet on it, and I think I might have done it last year, but I'm going to try to JB weld this and see if that fixes it. So this is what I'm going to be using, JB Weld plastic bonder. I am not getting endorsed for this product. I was told this is what is to be used, so I'm going to see if I can get this thing to work. It will save me about 200 bucks to replace that thing from the manufacturer. So let's give it a try. All right, so there it is. And then it says to mix thoroughly with the provided popsicle stick. So I'm going to mix this up now and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so this is after mixing for a couple of minutes. You can see it's like a yellow paste. So now I'm going to apply it. I'm going to need 2 hands for this, but you can use your imagination on how I applied it. I am just going to use that popsicle stick that came with. Okay, so here we are. There it is after application. Again, I just used the popsicle stick that came with it. Apparently this thing will cure in about 15 minutes and it'll be totally dry in about a half an hour. You can see here I mixed a little more than what I needed, but I've got some good feelings about this. Hopefully it comes through. Now back to the air filter. All right, here's a side-by-side comparison between the old filter and the new filter. I went OEM filter on this because I just didn't want to wait for Amazon the 2 or 3 days it would have taken. I paid about $60 Canadian for it, about $70 Canadian with taxes. I've seen them on Amazon for as little as 35, 40 bucks. And if you're interested, there's your part number, 11013-0745. And that will work on a 2020 Ninja EX650. So something interesting, if you look at the back of this, it's got that metal screen. You'll see the screw on the original. The new one does not have the screw, so just be aware of that. You are going to need to pop out that screw. So let's see if I can get this installed. So there it is. It's a direct fit. I'm just going to screw in that Phillips screw right here. Let's try to do it with one hand. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, let's put the cover on. All right, so I was able to set these screws in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Oh, it looks like there's 8 screws on here. All right, so I got these 8 screws set in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, now with the air cover screwed in, we're going to come over here and plug in this sensor. I'm not exactly sure what this is for, but it should be just plug and play. Snaps in. That's it. So the next piece, we're going to tie in the fuel tank to this hose, as well as the overflow tank right here. So we got this providing fuel pressure, and that's for overflow if you overfill your tank. So I'm going to give that a try. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to reinstall these cable holder clips. So there's going to be one right here, and one right here. So stand by. All right, so I found something interesting when you're installing these wire clamp pieces. If you can see here, there's a nipple on the back, and it allows you to install it without mixing it up. So here you can see that there's a notch and a nipple that allows you to put this piece onto this section. And alternatively, the nipple on the upper version is on the front, and that's designed so you don't mix them up. Pretty cool, actually. So now I'm going to try to install the fuel hose and the overfill hose on the gas tank. So the main fuel line plugged in quite nicely. There's a quick little snap pin that holds it into place. Now I'm going to manage the overflow hose, which is right here. And essentially what this does is when you overfill your tank and you shake your tank around, it will empty some fuel through this hose to underneath your motorcycle. So I'm going to try to get this on here. This is not a pressurized line, it is just an overflow. Okay. I might just zip tie that actually. I don't know if I really trust that metal clamp. I'll see if I've got a zip tie. All right, I think it took me longer to find this zip tie than to install it. So there it is. It's not going anywhere. So again, you overfill your tank. It'll come up through the inner tube and it'll just drain down right by the pedal, somewhere down here. Okay, next I'm going to try to bolt in the tank. See how that goes. All right, so I roughly aligned the fuel tank to their mounting holes. And just remember, beneath this there's a metal washer. This will pop out when you pull out your tank. This one here has them up top. So you can see the difference here. This came off the rear and this came off the front top of the tank. So let's just start with that. Now for the rear. Okay. I was contemplating putting Loctite on these threads, but I didn't notice any on there, so I'm not going to bother. Tighten these by hand. And then I'll check the torque settings for this. I think it's about 88 pounds or so. Okay. Yeah. I'll come back once these are torqued in. All right, so the tank bolts are torqued in to 18 foot-pounds, not 80 foot-pounds. So that's nice and secure. Next, I'm going to attempt to put these fairings back on without cracking anything. Let's see how that looks. All right, so I got this whole side fairing on. Took a bit of finagling, but wasn't that hard per se. Just be very patient that you're not cracking your plastics. So I'm going to try to do the other side now. All right, so the right side fairing has been installed. For some reason, this was a bit trickier than the left side. I'm not sure why. The next piece we're gonna go for is this seat bracket. So let's give it a go. All right, so you can see that the seat bracket has been installed. Initially I thought there was too much play here, but I think there's just rubber underneath it. Otherwise you get too much vibration. So now we'll test it to put the seat in. Yeah. Fits like a glove. We may as well try the other seat. All right, I think we're just about there. So it's been probably well over half an hour, and this JB plastic weld seems to have cured. You can still see a bit of the crack on the outside, but it's only noticeable when you put a bright light on it. I think this might work. If not, I'll just order a replacement. So let's see if this fits. All right, well, I got the bike all together. I guess the next thing is find out if this thing runs or not. I only had about 12 extra screws left over. Just kidding. There were some grommets that probably gonna need replacing soon. So let's see if this thing starts.